Morbid Facts, Part 2. This photo shows the dramatic differences between two boys who were exposed to the same smallpox source in 1901. One of them was vaccinated, the other one was not. These punishing shoes were a type of medieval torture device. The victim would have to stand on their tippy toes for as long as they could before falling back and having rusty spikes jammed into their heel. Artist William Udermolen was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease in 1995. Over the next 5 years, he drew these self-portraits of himself which displayed the devastating effects of the disease. In 1985, a 13-year-old Colombian girl was trapped up to her waist in volcanic mud flow. She was mostly alert and was interviewed, but rescuers couldn't find a way to save her. Knowing she would certainly die, volunteers did their best to comfort her. She died after 60 hours, and her image became iconic. In 2008, a Brazilian priest strapped 1,000 balloons onto a lawn chair and rode it into the sky as part of a fundraiser. He was able to reach an altitude of 20,000 feet before losing contact with authorities. Over a month later, the lower half of his body was found floating near an oil rig. Until as recently as 1985, doctors believed that babies couldn't feel pain and performed surgeries on them without anesthesia. Due to their unique spinal structure, elephants are not meant to carry heavy loads on their backs. They often suffer severe spinal injuries as a result of carrying tourists around for several hours each day. In 2010, 35-year-old Gurkha soldier Bishnu Shrestha was sleeping on a train when it was hijacked by 40 armed robbers. Eventually, a group of them reached his seat and woke him up with their knives drawn. He was about to give up his belongings until he noticed a woman near him screaming for help since she was about to be raped. So Bishnu pulled out his kukri machete and killed 3 of the men while injuring 8 others. The woman was brought to safety and her parents offered Bishnu a significant cash reward, but he refused. He told them fighting the enemy in battle is my duty as a soldier, but taking on those thugs on the train was my duty as a human being. The longest anyone has survived on a shipwrecked raft was 133 days. In November of 1942, Poon Lim was working aboard a British naval ship when it was blown up by a German torpedo. Poon found a raft and sustained himself by fishing, catching birds, and drinking rain. On one occasion, he even killed a shark and drank its blood for hydration. He was rescued by some fishermen near Brazil and was able to walk without assistance. Hollywood star Hedy Lamarr was once dubbed the most beautiful woman in the world. But she was also a mathematician who invented a technique called frequency hopping during World War II. This technique was eventually used to develop GPS, Bluetooth, and Wi-Fi. She wasn't inducted into the National Inventors Hall of Fame until 14 years after her death. She spent her life wishing people would appreciate her brain instead of just her beauty. These are some heroes of 9/11 that everyone should know about. In the 1980s, actor Steve Buscemi was a New York City firefighter for 5 years. So when 9/11 happened, he showed up at his old firehouse to volunteer. For an entire week, he worked 12-hour shifts digging through rubble to try to find people. When his mom told him about the attack, ex-Marine Jason Thomas retrieved his Marine uniform and sped down to Ground Zero immediately. With the help of another Marine, he managed to save 2 policemen who were stuck in the rubble. A guide dog named Roselle led a group of people, including her blind owner, down 78 flights of stairs before the North Tower collapsed. She stopped once only to give kisses to a woman who was having a panic attack. The only off-duty NYPD officer who was killed in 9/11 had signed his retirement papers that morning. But instead of leaving his badge, John William Perry decided to pick it up one last time. During World War II, JFK was stranded in the Solomon Islands and ended up carving a message into a coconut. A native islander delivered it to the closest U.S. military base and saved his life. When he became president, Kennedy used the coconut as a paperweight on his desk in the Oval Office. This is a 1942 photo of Japanese troops using prisoners of war for target practice. During World War II, a German pilot spotted an American pilot's crippled plane in the sky. He noticed that the gunner was dead, the crew was injured, and that they didn't pose any threat. So instead of destroying the plane, he led it to safety and spared the men's lives. 40 years later, the 2 pilots reunited and became fishing buddies. Teddy Roosevelt's son Quentin fought in World War I as a pilot. He was killed in a dogfight and his plane crashed behind enemy lines. But the Germans gave him a full military burial with honors. They apparently admired the fact that a president's son chose to fight. During World War II, prisoners of war were treated so nicely in Canada that many of them didn't want to leave when they were released. During the same war, Soviet forces tried to train dogs to run under enemy tanks with bombs on their backs. However, this evil plan fortunately ended up failing miserably. Because the dogs had been trained using Soviet tanks, when it came to the real battlefield, many dogs ended up running under friendly Soviet tanks, blowing them up instead. During a World War II battle in the Pacific, American soldier Thomas Baker was badly wounded but refused to be evacuated. Instead, he ordered his squad to leave him propped up against a tree with nothing but a pistol and 8 bullets. Later, they returned to find Baker dead holding an empty pistol, with 8 dead Japanese soldiers lying around him. 65 years after it crash-landed on a beach in Wales, an American P-38 fighter plane emerged from the sand where it lay buried. After Colonel Robert Gould Shaw was killed in the Second Battle of Fort Wagner in 1863, he was buried in a mass grave as an insult for leading the first all-black regiment in American history. When troops tried to recover his body, his father proudly said, "We will not have his body removed from where it lies, surrounded by his brave and devoted soldiers." Lieutenant Colonel A.J. Drexel Biddle was a master in hand-to-hand combat. He used to order his troops to surround him with bayonets before single-handedly disarming each of them without any of his own weapons. This photo of one such demonstration was taken in 1943. Tsar Bomba was the largest bomb ever set off by far. It produced a mushroom cloud 168 times taller than the Empire State Building. Its power output was 1.4% of the sun's, and it sent shockwaves that traveled around the Earth 3 times. After a battle in Vietnam, Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez had 37 puncture wounds, exposed intestines, and a broken jaw. He was pronounced dead until he spit in the face of a doctor who was zipping him up in a body bag. William Hitler despised his uncle Adolf and fled from Germany to fight for the US during World War II. William's sons also agreed to never have children in order to kill off Hitler's bloodline. During World War II, Michelangelo's statue of David was encased in bricks to prevent damage from bombs. On Christmas in 1914 during World War I, the British and Germans laid down their weapons. They crossed over no man's land and joined each other to celebrate the holiday. They exchanged food, played games, and even attended burials for each side. It was seen as a symbolic moment during the brutal war. Nicknamed White Death, Finnish sniper Simo Häyhä killed over 500 Soviet soldiers during the Winter War. He did it in less than 100 days using nothing but a hunting rifle with no scope. When asked what he felt while killing an enemy soldier, he responded, "The recoil." This was the breastplate of 19-year-old Antoine Frevaux. He was struck and killed by a cannonball while serving under Napoleon Bonaparte during the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. These German prisoners of war were forced to watch a film on the atrocities of the Holocaust. Many of them were outright horrified and even burned their Nazi uniforms after watching the footage. The arm of Civil War General Thomas Stonewall Jackson has its own grave. In 1863, his arm had to be amputated after he was accidentally shot by his own Confederate troops. But he was so famous that no one could bear to throw the arm into the pile of discarded limbs. So instead, it was given its own burial. M&Ms were invented in 1941 so that American soldiers could enjoy chocolate that was heat-resistant and easy to transport during World War II. Initially, they were sold exclusively to the US military. During World War II, a Dutch minesweeper evaded the Japanese for 8 days disguised as an island. The crew covered the decks in trees and painted exposed surfaces to look like rocks. They moved only at night and anchored close to the shore during the day, eventually escaping to Australia. Weird War Facts, Part 29. In 1932, Australia declared war on about 20,000 emus that were destroying farmland. While a number of birds were killed, the emu population persisted and ended up winning the war. Switzerland's military has remained neutral since 1815, but the entire country is rigged to explode. Thousands of demolition points are wired into bridges, highways, and railroads across the nation to quickly halt invaders. During World War II, German tank drivers in Africa would drive over camel poop for good luck. The Allies caught wind of this and responded by planting landmines disguised as camel poop. Once the Germans realized this, they began running over piles that already had tire tracks over them. In turn, the Allies made mines that looked like overrun camel poop. In 2013, a 5-year-old girl was kidnapped out of her driveway in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But 15-year-old Tamar Boggs chased the car for 20 minutes until the kidnapper released the child. Iceland is so safe that parents routinely leave their babies outside to nap in their strollers while they run errands. This is a photo of Kwame Ajamu being told by a judge that he is a free man after being falsely imprisoned for 27 years. Future biotechnology could make prisoners feel as though they're serving a 1,000-year sentence in a matter of hours. Drugs and electronics could be developed to distort prisoners' minds into thinking that time was passing more slowly. In 1996, 14-year-old Barry Lukaitis opened fire on his high school algebra class in Washington State. He killed 2 fellow students and the teacher. As his classmates were panicking, he was quoted saying, "This sure beats the hell out of algebra, doesn't it?" He is currently serving out a 189-year prison sentence for the murders. The Dutch police once caught some cannabis growers because their house was the only one on the street without snow on the roof. Stephen Russell escaped prison by using laxatives to fake the symptoms of AIDS. He then called the prison posing as a doctor and asked for any inmates who were interested in experimental AIDS treatment. He volunteered, and once he was out of Texas, he sent a fake death certificate to the prison stating that he had died. Infamous streaker Mark Roberts was sponsored by GoldenPalace.com to streak during Super Bowl 38. He was paid $1 million, given front row tickets, and was provided with one of the best defense attorneys in the U.S. He was able to reduce his charges down to a misdemeanor and a $1,000 fine. Brian Banks spent 6 years in prison before his alleged rape victim admitted that it never happened. This was the moment when he was exonerated. In 2006, 51-year-old Susan Walters was attacked by a hitman that her husband had hired to kill her. After finding out who sent him, she ended up killing him with her bare hands. Hall of Fame boxer Sugar Ray Robinson once had a dream where he killed his next opponent in the ring. Afraid that his dream was telling him something, he initially backed out of his next fight until a priest convinced him otherwise. He ended up scoring a decisive knockout in the 8th round that resulted in the death of his opponent, Jimmy Doyle. A Russian woman once caught her fiancé cheating on her when she saw him with another woman on Google Street View. In 2015, a man found a Mountain Dew bottle from 1992 that would have won him a brand new Super Nintendo. Jim Springer and Jim Lewis are identical twins who were separated at birth but ended up living nearly identical lives. Both married a woman named Linda, got divorced, and remarried a woman named Betty. They also both had a dog named Toy, drove a Chevy, and smoked Salem cigarettes. All of this was discovered when they were reunited at the age of 39. These are some of the worst movie set disasters in history. David Holmes was Daniel Radcliffe's stunt double in the Harry Potter films until a freak accident abruptly ended his career. While filming for the Deathly Hallows, Holmes was thrown too hard against the wall and ended up breaking his neck, paralyzing him from the chest down. In the early 90s, Bruce Lee's son Brandon was making a name for himself until tragedy struck while he was filming for The Crow. A bullet was lodged in the barrel of a prop gun and ended up hitting Lee right in the chest, killing him at the young age of 28. While filming for the 1983 Twilight Zone movie, one scene called for an explosion to happen underneath a flying helicopter. But the explosion caused the helicopter to spin out of control, resulting in the death of star Vic Morrow and 2 young child actors. This led to Hollywood abandoning helicopter scenes for years until the prevalence of CGI. Johnny Depp said he based his depiction of Willy Wonka on how he imagined former President George W. Bush to act while stoned. This is what the set of the original black and white Addams Family TV show looked like in color. The actor who played Danny in The Shining didn't know it was a horror movie until he was done with filming. He was led to believe that he was just filming a drama movie of a family that lives in a hotel. A group of psychologists studied 400 movies to find the most realistic psychopath, and the winner was Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men. They said that he seems to be effectively invulnerable and resistant to any form of humanity or emotion. Actor Barkhad Abdi only received $65,000 for his award-winning role in the movie Captain Phillips. After production, he returned to selling mobile phones at his brother's shop in a Minneapolis mall. Dwayne Johnson's beard in the movie Hercules was made out of the testicle hair of a yak. Actress Tammy Lynn Leppert, who played a small role in the movie Scarface, disappeared soon after filming. She hasn't been seen nor heard from since 1983, when she was only 18 years old. Paranormal Activity had a budget of only $15,000 but made nearly $200 million at the box office. During the first screening, people started walking out and studio executives thought that the movie was bombing. They later learned that the viewers were leaving because they were too scared to continue watching. These are some insane coincidences that'll make you question reality. A Chinese couple recently discovered that they were in the same photograph as teenagers, more than a decade before they even met. On the left is the facial reconstruction of a 9,000-year-old skeleton that was found in a cave in Cheddar, England. His DNA was tested and researchers found that a living relative was teaching history only a half-mile away from the site, linking back 300 generations. These identical strangers happened to sit next to each other on a flight. When Don Carcos fought in World War II, he was hit with shrapnel and blinded in his right eye. While working in a barn 64 years later, a horse headbutted him in the exact same spot. The man was thrown into the wall with force, but his vision was suddenly restored. Insane Coincidences, Part 4. An Australian man named Bill Morgan was once declared dead for 14 minutes but somehow survived. To celebrate his survival, he bought some scratch-offs and won a car. When the news asked him to reenact the moment, he bought another scratch-off for the cameras and won a $250K jackpot. This person was saved from a $300 fine thanks to this absolute bro of a bird blocking their license plate from the camera. This same injured whale was photographed 35 years apart off the coast of Mexico. A man named Walter Summerford was struck by lightning 3 times throughout his life. After his death, his grave was also struck. In 2018, a woman from Canada was shot in the chest from point blank, but miraculously her breast implant deflected the bullet and her only injury was a fractured rib. In 1952, Werner von Braun wrote a book called Project Mars about the first manned expedition to the Red Planet. The book imagined that human colonists on Mars would be led by a person named Elon. In 2013, a woman in Florida was waiting to buy Powerball tickets when she let an elderly lady go ahead of her in line. The 84-year-old lady ended up winning the $590 million jackpot. A Swedish woman lost her wedding ring in her garden until she found it 16 years later growing on a carrot. In 2001, the Taliban used dynamite to demolish this 4th century Buddha statue that was carved in Afghanistan. While initially devastating, it was found that the explosions had revealed 50 caves that were untouched for 1,600 years. Inside the caves, researchers uncovered some ancient Buddhist relics, including the oldest oil paintings in the world. In August of 2000, the band Dream Theater recorded a live studio album called Live Scenes from New York. The album cover art features the skyline of New York City on fire, and the craziest part is that it was released on September 11, 2001. This 3,000-year-old sculpture of an Egyptian princess looks exactly like Michael Jackson. After a family lost their dog during Hurricane Sandy, they decided to give up and find a new one 2 years later. So they went to the local shelter, and the first animal the counselor showed them was their missing dog. This faulty 5 Below sign still says the same thing. In 1974, a mother dying from cancer gave a special ring to her son, but he lost it in a river 2 weeks later. After 39 years passed, a diver found the ring underwater and returned it to the man, who was in the hospital dying from cancer. In late 1864, the brother of John Wilkes Booth was boarding a train when he noticed a man was about to be crushed by the car. So he quickly grabbed the man by the collar and pulled him to safety. The man he'd saved was Robert Lincoln, the son of the president who would be assassinated by John Wilkes Booth just months later. In 1903, a pair of nearly identical strangers named Will West and William West ended up in the same Kansas prison. This case was a big part of the reason why fingerprints are now used for identification. In 2019, a young man named Tyler Moon was running in a Minneapolis marathon when he suddenly collapsed. Thankfully, he was wearing a Jesus Saves Running bib since the man behind him was a nurse who performed CPR and saved his life. The nurse's first name was Jesus. When a Filipino fisherman's anchor got stuck on a rock, he decided to take it home with him as a good luck charm. He kept it under his bed for 10 years until his house burned down in a fire. He soon found out that it was actually the largest pearl ever found, valued at right around $100 million. This man painted a girl inspired by his imagination, and when he met someone who looked exactly like her, he married her. In July of this year, marine biologists spotted a real-life yellow sponge and pink sea star near a mountain in the Atlantic. A Brazilian police officer was saved when the Nokia in his back pocket stopped a bullet that was fired at him. In 1915, a distraught woman who was late to her sister's funeral demanded to see her one last time. So the coffin was raised out of the ground, and when it was opened, the dead woman sat up and smiled. She went on to live for another 47 years. Months before his sudden death, Mythbuster Grant Imahara built a fully animatronic Baby Yoda. After spending 3 months of his personal time designing and programming the robot, he intended on bringing it to hospitals to cheer up sick children. William Kyle Carpenter threw himself in front of a grenade in Afghanistan to shield his best friend. He's the youngest living recipient of the Medal of Honor and has progressed incredibly well in his recovery. This bride's father died 10 years ago and his heart was donated. The man who received the transplant ended up walking her down the aisle. In 2010, Gary Richmond was senselessly beaten into a coma and barely made it through emergency surgery. He woke up with no memory of his wife of 20 years but ended up falling in love with her all over again. In 1996, a man's body floated up to a boat in the UK seas. There was no identification on the body except for a 25-year-old Rolex Oyster on his wrist. As Rolex maintained such meticulous service records, they were able to identify the victim and ultimately the killer. On average, men receive 63% longer sentences than females for the exact same crime. Nigerian scammers once sold a fake airport to a major international bank for $242 million. The scam wasn't discovered until 3 years later. Portugal decriminalized all drugs 20 years ago and has viewed addiction as a public health crisis rather than a crime. Ever since then, Portugal has had one of the lowest percentages of drug addicts in all of Europe. This man has the rarest blood type in the world, known as Rh0. It's known as the golden blood type since it's only been found in 43 people throughout recorded history. The blue dragon is the rarest mollusk in the world and looks like something from outer space. Some animals can be born as bilateral gynandromorphs, meaning they're male on one side and female on the other. This insanely rare condition is most commonly observed in insects and birds. In rare cases, dead organisms are filled in with opal rather than mud or stone, creating these mesmerizing fossils. Once thought to be a separate subspecies, the king cheetah is just an African cheetah with a rare mutation of the fur. First discovered in 1926, this badass freak of nature has only been seen in the wild 6 times.